Hello again. I moved because everywhere is hot and I wanted to sit by one of my favourite trees here. So what have we discussed? Kind of the theory of Hex-Positive witchcraft, and now let's move into the practice. God's still got that kind of classroom influence here, but anyway. So when I started actually hexing, it was 2019, February. I was about to go and present at a magical conference in France about some of these historical hexes and political resistance that I just discussed. And just before I was going to go, did for the first time with a friend some ceremonial magic on a new moon, and half an hour later this book came into my possession. Apocalyptic Witchcraft, again Bluminek from Scarlet Imprint, but this text really put into words the kind of radical nature of witchcraft and a lot of ideas that I'd had in kind of quite a polemic but radical text, where the classic quote from Peter Gray is, "It's time for witchcraft not to choose, but remember which side it is on the struggle." So, after researching all this stuff, it's like, Bluminek, I better start, actually doing stuff. So how might one want to do a hex against the unjust structures of society? Well, for starters, let's talk about the waning crescent moon. It's a perfect time to do them. So, we've got the new moon when it's the darkest, you've got the full moon, and as the moon is getting smaller, the last quarter is the waning crescent, kind of like decaying energy, chaos, destruction before things are planted anew. And so these waning, sorry, a bird shat on me. Nature won't stop me. So I did just say all bodies of water dance to the rhythms of the moon, and just because you're a witch who might not bleed doesn't mean that you can't do magical work, and you can of course still use the lunar energies. But it was through recognizing my own kind of period cycles that I came to see how my body and my practices changes with the fluctuations of the moon. And so every month it would be the same old story. Last month of the cycle I'd be really depressed, really angry, and this month I just thought, or the first month, Bluminek, like a massive dog just went past. Anyway, just notice I'd resolved to take all this like negative energy and direct it at something else. Now in this first instance it was a shopping centre, which I would discuss at another time, not really appropriate here. We're going to talk about hexing white supremacy. But yeah, so waning crescent moon energies, it's something we can all tap into, but I find it useful. So these, eternal cycles of the month. If you've got a grievance, I save it for the waning crescent moon. Or if you've got a grievance that can't be, immediately resolved, rather than it influencing all your practice when, between the new moon and the full moon, it's time for planting seeds, healing, protection. The other half is for other kinds of business. So, if you have a grievance, I would say save it for the waning crescent moon rather than it ruminating for your mind. Waning crescent energy is a force that we should all tap into. So what can you do on the waning crescent? Well, a lot of people who give out kind of recipes for cursing, black candles, always a classic. But each hex, each curse could be different. But what I like to do is what I refer to as walking widdershins beneath the waning crescent moon. So widdershins is the historical name for anti-clockwise direction, as opposed to the direction of the sun, which is kind of generative. The other way is the direction of chaos. So what does that mean? Well, as I said, in my own personal practice and Hex-Positive practice, I quite often like to hex structures, buildings, so maybe you might like to walk widdershins on a waning crescent moon around a police station, or around, a place that justice needs to be served. And a hex. So as I said, I'm not going to go into like specific details, but they're definitely just a good Sorry, it's tut mir leid. Lady asking if I've got any empty bottles. Gave me a little air kiss. What was I talking about? So it's a good way to like think through issues and like debate them in your mind. So I just suggested you might want to walk widdershins anti-clockwise around a police station. I was thinking about this last night. So there would be benefit from doing that, but then what about, you know, the innocent prisoners inside? You might instead think it might be more appropriate to go clockwise around there. And what I want to point out is that, you know, I don't just do hexes, and for there to be kind of a rebalance of power in the world, you got to go both ways. So the Waning Crescent is for the hexing, the rest of the cycle is for turning around, turning the other way, and eventually the power should be redistributed. That's another way you can use widdershins. Or maybe, you know, you got a group of people, your coven, your radical coven, and you want to get together, raise some energy, raise some power. Nothing better than just like running around anti-clockwise, getting the tornado up. You know, there might be a building where things are trapped in and you want to raise the power to fling open the windows and let things out. Could be a good way. And so taking it back to witches and whiteness and how we can use these tools in the service of the struggle for racial justice and dismantling systems of oppression. Well, you know, white folks in cloaks running around probably aren't going to face the repercussions that more marginalized people might do. So we can use this to our advantage to be the ones putting our bodies, putting our cloaks on the line, and actually being out on the streets and challenging these things. Now I say probably white folks in cloaks aren't going to get shot, but you know, I'm talking probably more about in Europe. America has revealed that no one is immune to the violence from the police. Well, you know, they've shot in the face with pepper spray children, beat down old men, the press, young women on their knees getting fucking kicked in the face. So if you're in America, maybe let's reconsider your tactics, or not reconsider, but be aware of the dangers that are posed. But even still, I think the repercussions are definitely not going to be as serious as if you're a black practitioner of magic running around with a cloak. We have to be aware of these things and acknowledge it and work with what we have in order to challenge these things. And so that brings me to an idea. So everyone's talking about allyship at the moment, which is really good that everyone's educating themselves. I think from a witchcraft perspective, I really like the concept of a co-conspirator. So what is a co-conspirator? I feel it fits in very nicely with kind of radical witchcraft practices because, you know, the witches' international terrorist conspiracy from hell. But a co-conspirator, the term I came across, it's from Bettina Love, who is an African-American scholar from upstate New York, and I encountered these ideas when I was in Ithaca and attended the Kinfolk Festival, which was a festival promoting and elevating queer, trans, black artists. And this was for a workshop about white allyship. And so the idea of co-conspirator, it moves beyond an ally. And so Bettina Love gives this example, which I think really kind of explains it quite clearly. She gives the example of two activists. One is an African-American woman, one is a white activist, so of course in a privileged position. They want to do an action, which is remove a Confederate flag from a flagpole. So in order for this to be I was going to say a fair practice, or, you know, the person who's going to be climbing the pole is the African-American black activist. It's for her to remove the flag. If the white guy is doing it, that's going to be kind of seen as white saviorism, it's kind of paternal things. But what can the white guy do? So she climbed the pole, the police came to this metal pole, and what they were about to do was tase it, metal pole, the lady would have fallen down. So what this white guy does, he just puts his hand on the pole, and safe in the knowledge back then, who knows now, that the police would not tase the pole. So he used his white privilege and his body in the service of radical activism as a co-conspirator. So in terms of witchcraft, what could this mean? Similar practices, you know, it would be good for collaboration. I realise there's a lot of white witchcraft circles aren't very inclusive, or the situation in Europe is very different, but it is time for us to really step up our game. Why is that? Well, it's quite obvious, but I'm going to explain it in a second once I've had another look at my notes, because this is where the fire really comes and I don't want to mess up. Hang on. Okay, yeah. So for the end, I wanted to return back to the Haitian Revolution. Again, a story that should not be romanticised, but is a story we can learn from. So in the Haitian Revolution, first slavery was abolished while it was still a colony of France. The Black Jacobins appealed to the kind of discourses that was surrounding it during the French Revolution, you know, the rights of man. If you can apply the rights of man to your own country, then why don't you apply them to the colony? And so slavery was abolished. I mean, it was like these things never really end. It was subtly reintroduced through vagrancy laws. But anyway, after I think it's about 5 years of slavery being abolished, Napoleon comes along and decides that he wants to reinstate slavery and sent thousands of troops over there. Eventually, of course, they won. But so Napoleon sent, part of his troops were a lot of white Polish, not militia, but part of his army were white Polish people who also, Poland had been, is the word colonized by Napoleon? But they were sent there to reinstate slavery, and in fact many of the Polish troops defected and joined the other team. So when white witchcraft practitioners are thinking about how are they connected to this struggle, you know, people might think, you know, well, it wasn't my ancestors who were slave owners, and that may be the case, but that's irrelevant because we have all benefited from this. And if you look at the kind of racist colonial system that has been imposed across the Atlantic, as I said, it was a continuation of the Inquisition, and you know, as witches, we are one. We need to struggle and dismantle this monstrosity which we have benefited from, and at the cost of many people's lives, a lot of suffering. And I believe what we need to do, and what I have been doing in my practice, not to say I'm not a perfect person, make a lot of mistakes, going anti-clockwise, walk widdershins around the Atlantic. We have to undo this thing, you know, and if you're not willing to step up your game and start doing it, you're not worthy of sharing our moon. I like to think about it in a way of kind of, you know, these shitty straight guys who don't go down on the girlfriend, or they do it because they feel like they have to, you know. What I want to know is, why do you not take joy in that? Why, to bring it back to the subject at hand, why do you not want to and feel it, you know, a joy to want to dismantle this shitty system of oppression that we find ourselves in? Why are you not going to spend your time helping to liberate people oppressed around the world, including yourself? You know, everything we do should be to achieving liberation for all. And I'll leave it at that. On this waning crescent moon, let's hex the shit out of the police and the white supremacists. They're the same thing. These fucking militia are the police. Going down.